Welcome back to the Always Right podcast. I'm author Carissa DeLay, and this is my drinking co-host.
Jamie Vendera. I did that just for you.
I'm rocking my toboggan or my cap to be like Jamie today.
Well, this is a Star Set cap, and it's old. Dustin Bates. I text him and gripe about it. Make more of these. I'm going to wear this till it has holes and it falls off my head. Quit being stingy. I know you got some in supply in your garage or somewhere.
Wow,
just send them all to me.
Calling Dustin out.
I am. You can post that. You can take this clip and put it on Instagram, and we'll tag him.
Well, mine was from my husband got me mine. Mine was from mine's the Destiny Iron Banner toboggan, but it's Florida and it's 75 and kind of not so great in my hair right now.
I just put it on because I'm just lazy. I just washed my hair and combed it back, and it's wet still, so it looked greasy.
Although I should have taken my toboggan with me when I was in Ohio last week with you.
No kidding.
It was so cold. I'm like, oh, what is this?
Yep.
Take me back to Florida.
Yep, I know. Rub it in. So
yeah, but Jamie and I got to meet back up. We hadn't seen each other in a couple years, and it was nice. Got to have.
I know. It feels like it was yesterday, and I'm like, if you were still here, I would be covered in tattoos, and so would my wife.
Yeah, I was able to visit for just a little bit after my grandma had passed away. What is happening here? Why can you not? I'm trying to get our YouTube channel in the background, but it just wants to give me waterfalls and other pictures.
It's actually inspiring to me since you're on my Ours to Finish Age of the Sigil 4, and it's.
Well, we'll just keep that there then. Like inspired.
Yeah, I'm getting ideas as I'm looking at your screen.
See,
writers, that's what happens.
All right, so we're going to cover a very tricky topic today. And before we start, disclaimer, we are not lawyers.
Not at all.
We are just covering something that's it's literally in its own right, kind of like sketchy, because there are laws and then there are not laws and there are laws being tested. And so we are going to talk about public domain. Jamie brought this up in a previous episode, and I was interested because I didn't know much about public domain, what it is as far as how it comes available to the public. So I was familiar with some of the work she had talked about in that episode, where it's like people can take Frankenstein or Mary Shelley's stuff and they can reinvent it. But I wanted to know more about the laws that kind of house that. So we're going to talk about that today. I've taken extensive notes. So if you see Jamie and I referring, it's because we want to be as accurate as possible when we're giving these clarification notes for what public domain is. Therefore, if you see me looking, I'm just like making sure that I'm not saying it wrong.
But, even before we start, why are we even doing this? Because there is, not that we don't want you to be creative, but there is tons of previously released material that you could draw upon. I'm sure that's why Pride and Prejudice and Zombies came to be. They were able to do that. My old partner from 711 Press, Daniel Middleton from Scribe Freelance, he did that for a while, and I can't remember what books he did. Probably Pride and Prejudice, Little Women, books like this. He just grabbed it from public domain. He redid the font. He changed the cover, and he put it out there. That's why you go on to look for Little Women, and there's going to be dozens and dozens of Kindle versions from all these different people, because people have learned, hey, I can put out a public domain work and make money off of it. It could be part of what I'm doing. It's perfectly legal as long as you follow the laws.
Well, and the laws were kind of established to allow the people, that's why it's public domain. Once it's hit its peak where it's available, it's to keep creative flow going and not just house it to where someone can't take that creative aspect and reimagine it. So it was meant to, when it was actually kind of created by our founding fathers, it was created to push creativity, past its limit after the copyright or after the person passed away or whatever. So you want the term? What is public domain?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, no, you go ahead.
Okay, the term public domain refers to the creative material that are not protected by intellectual property laws, such as copyright, trademark, or patent laws. That's where it gets really tricky. And
Yep.
that's where Disney is kind of like on the forefront of changing these laws and allowing these laws to evolve by creating some of your once copyrighted things into your trademark. Like Steamboat Willie is a huge part of like changing and interchanging trademark. So that's really cool. Which we've had to deal with trademark, you and I.
Yep.
And then we own it.
Yep.
The public owns these works, not an individual author or artist. That's where it was created. So that way, after the original person passes, there's a certain time frame that the copyright holds, and then it becomes public domain. And this is different in every country. Not every country practices the same time lot. So that's key to know your laws on that one. And anyone can use public domain work without obtaining permission, but no one can ever own it. So like your original Pride and Prejudice that you mentioned, the original work as it stands, as the characters are created, as the words are laid out, even if Daniel takes those, he cannot recopyright that specific one. He can reanimate it and change it a little bit, and then he owns the copyright on that. But you cannot copyright something that has been public domain.
Correct.
So every year, this is something that's really cool. And we should probably next year, January 1st, do a public domain release and just kind of talk about some of the new works that are coming out in 2025. But every year on January 1st, that's Public Domain Day. So people kind of get in there, and I think Duke University has a huge thing. Like they have a whole study on like things that are coming out, and they have a whole website for public domain that they kind of help people navigate with the understanding what the laws mean. But so every year the collection is basically released, and I think this year we got like Tarzan. I think. And this is where it's going to get tricky. So Winnie the Pooh the original Winnie the Pooh had already been released prior. And that's where someone made some kind of like really dark version of Winnie the Pooh.
Yep. I remember.
Yeah. But that version, Tigger wasn't in that version. So they could not add Tigger until the version with Tigger made it to the public domain. So now that Tigger has come into 2024, there probably will be a sequel to that horrifying movie with Tigger in it. So interesting. So yeah, and that's kind of where the whole Steamboat Willie thing, I don't know if you went down that rabbit hole or not, but I did when I was trying to study the learning of the public domain stuff. So the reason that we have Steamboat Willie actually came from a public domain dispute with Disney. And that's where he started living at the studio, because he almost went bankrupt because of that character Oswald or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Looked kind of like a black and white rabbit that kind of looked like Mickey in a sense. But basically Walt Disney lost his intellectual property rights based on the way they did things. I'm not 100% versed on how that fell into place, but I know there was some kind of back and forth, like trading of people and trade of intellectual rights in that sense. And then it came down to where Walt Disney was basically living in his studio on almost bankrupt. And that's when those mice were running around. And that's where he created this Steamboat Willie version and kind of like found a way to kind of protect his stuff and copyright it and kind of push it forward. So, but right now, the only version of Steamboat Willie that is copyright or public domain is that first short. Because I took a picture, and I'm going to read this verbatim because it is specifically to the writing of Section 8 of the laws. That increments of expression and derivative works. So, you have Steamboat Willie. But if that character progresses and changes in additional works, you cannot, like the Tigger part. Tigger was an additional work. So you can only take the original one after its copyright date and use that. You cannot use any other attributes that are added, any kind of new added clothing, like the current Mickey Mouse that has the red shorts and stuff. He's kind of a derivative of an evolving Mickey Mouse. So there's different avenues that are protected with trademarks and copyrights that you have to be very, very careful with. Like Superman. We've talked about Superman because I love Superman. Did you know there were certain issues or certain cartoon versions of Superman that
We're
were,
getting flame.
well, no, yeah, I know that part. No, where he wasn't, the copyright was listed wrong on the video.
Really?
So when you copyrighted their video and they had the little copyright date on it, they did it wrong. So it literally released to where there are these random Superman videos that are not part of it that people could offshoot because they did not do the copyright correct. So there are like a handful, there are a handful of those out there that basically are up for public domain because they didn't do the copyright correct. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to. We had this conversation earlier because, and you're like, you need to double check because I always thought it was 1923 when, and maybe, and a lot of it is also music. But I'm thinking back when Daniel was doing this, and I was like, man, that's been 2010 or so. And you're like, and then you're like, no, check because as of 2024 now, it's 1928. So anything 1928 or before, you have legal use to use it as long as you don't change it. And of course, you see that even like with Incredible Hulk, he was gray and now he's green. So, and that's beyond. That's not caught. It doesn't fall.
Well, and some of those things aren't necessarily public domain. Some of those things are, having rights to using things like Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was just a rendition of a book, but Steven Spielberg, was it Spielberg that did that movie?
Yep.
My husband will be correcting me if not. Okay. But he had to get rights from the author because that was still copyrighted. So that's where you have to get the legal rights to use something that's still under the copyright laws. That's different.
Well, then that would be why some of these lose out because if you don't file, because your copyright only lasts so long, you have to do your copyright extensions, and if you miss it, I wonder. Go ahead.
No, this is where the legal part of it got a little confusing for me because some of it I read and it was different with music. It was different with works of like even like do you remember like was it 2015 or something like that with the Happy Birthday song when they were trying to, do you not remember when you can't use Happy Birthday because our family owns the rights to that song? No. Do you remember that? Yes, no. I remember like restaurants were changing up their stuff for the longest time. But then it came down to the courts, and the court's like, you don't have legal rights to this because you can't prove that you have the copyright on it. Like the family couldn't prove it because that's the problem is someone doesn't properly copyright it. It's like so many years after they die that it's gone and it becomes like orphaned work. Like there's a whole section of orphaned works that basically if you don't protect your rights, it's gone. If you don't so but anyways, you can sing Happy Birthday.
I would make the joke that I don't have to worry about Raise Your Voice being in the public domain for 100 years, but this is sad to say, but I've seen, especially with Kindle, and this is just one instance, so much copying and plagiarism. So 50 Shades came out, Harry Potter came out, Raise Your Voice came out, and everyone's copying. So
yeah, you're jumping on the bandwagon, you're taking the idea and giving your version of it, but it's a little different because it's not really plagiarism because they have to copy you word for word, verbatim. But if they're taking your idea and not exactly creating the same characters, the same setting, like there's such a weird fine line with it. Go ahead.
You really need to watch this because we were talking about this. I was thinking, wow, I could go back before 23 and recordings and see what we could find because you could really take some old music and do something really cool. But I have a student, Rex Horton, who sings for Flat Black, and he posted this on my birthday last year. That he had a band when he lived on the East Coast, and they had an album and a bunch of songs, and somebody literally took all of his songs plus the Flat Black songs that were released, stuck them on Spotify under a new band name, and claimed that they were theirs. Of course, I know this isn't public domain, but this is how crazy it gets. So, and I'm just pointing out the story. So they're in trying to get it shut down and everything. It's just ridiculous. Not just him, this happens all the time with music. So if this interests you, like, wow, I could start an old classics, thing for my publishing company or for indie publishing, whatever you want to do. That's fine and dandy. but double check to make sure.
Yeah, I'd probably have a lawyer on staff
Yeah,
for
I would
that one.
follow it word for word, find the original, because you may be like, oh, well, here's a copy I got on Kindle, but they've changed it somewhat, which they could because public domain, like you said, they changed the shirt and style or they made it more modern. And if you copy that and not the original, yeah, you're going to end up in some trouble because
Yeah.
that's a new author's version of a public domain work.
When I was kind of explaining this to my daughter this morning, this also kind of so like with when I was looking up examples of like public domain works. I mean, this doesn't just happen with books. I mean, what you said with songs and stuff, but like news, history, facts, ideas, like even you printing like a political newspaper, you know, things like that. These are your ideas because you copyrighted your stuff. Those are still your words. Those are still technically copyrighted. So you know, like citations and things like that. Um, but like we talked plots, characters, themes, stuff like that. But U.S. federal legislation, enactments, and other official documents, titles of books or movies, procedures, methods, systems, processes, concepts, principles, discoveries, and devices. Now, all of these have different timelines. Like music, I think, has a different timeline than what books do. Other certain types of things have. I know, like whenever I was on Accutane, I was on the original Accutane back in the day before the 10-year. And after 10 years, they had to kind of give away their formula so people can make a generic version. But they had that 10-year hold, and then after that, they have to release the information. So it's kind of like the same idea. But I was trying to explain that sometimes when okay, here's a good one. I was just thinking about this one. My husband likes Return to Oz. I like The Wizard of Oz. Okay. So The Wizard of Oz was MGM, but it was an adaptation from a book series. Okay. So they had the rights to use the storyline from the books, but the red shoes. Okay. The ruby slippers in the MGM version were not in the books. Okay. That was something that was added to the MGM version of Wizard of Oz, which I love. So then when Disney came out with Return to Oz, you notice there was a lot of things that were different that didn't look like the Wizard of Oz MGM because some of those things were MGM's copyright, trademark, whatever versions of the storyline. So when Disney came out with it, because everybody that really knew Wizard of Oz kind of looked at the red shoes as kind of an iconic statement of Dorothy, Disney had to get rights from MGM to use that. There was that property right or that right to use it in their storyline, even though their storyline was different and they were going off the book adaptation from the public domain. It was still, hey, can we use the ruby slippers that you've added to your adaptation in our storyline? So it's kind of like that crossover. Like you can't. So if the original book doesn't have the ruby slippers, and you're taking public domain of that original story,
yeah, you cannot rewrite it.
You have to take from the original public domain. You can't take what someone else has added to and add it to yours. It's the same like with Frankenstein. So you have to go from the original Frankenstein and Mary Shelley. You can't go from the adaptations of Frankenstein and what he looks like now from what you see Frankenstein. You have to reanimate. That's why when you see some of the generic things out there that, oh, this is the Frankenstein's monster, it doesn't look anything like you've seen on TV, is because anything on TV is an imagination of the creator that has been adapted. So you can't use that. That's not public domain. The original description is the public domain.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. That's where my fear is. I'm cool with this. I mean, Daniel made good money doing this, but you know, he was very smart. He went to the original adaptation and he kept it word for word. He didn't change anything. You know, some people will be like, "Oh, I found this online, you know, or I bought this PDF. I'm just going to copy it and use it." And then someone's, you know, and the way Amazon is now, they could run copyright check and you could get busted that way. Or, you know, a friend of the author who rewrote it could read it like, wait a minute, this wasn't in the original story. There were no zombies in Pride and Prejudice, and that's already been put out, so you can't copy that. So
Well, I mean, technically you can if you make your setting, your storyline, and your characters different than what the adaptation is. So that's where it gets a little sketchy. So you can do another version of Pride and Prejudice with zombies, but you can call it the Zombies of Pride and Prejudice. So it's a new name, but you're changing the setting.
You would have to carefully watch everything.
Mhm.
You would have to carefully watch everything you do.
Plus, you would have to know the ins and outs of the originals.
Absolutely, because if you did and they wanted to take you to court and they had a lawyer really read like, no, boom. Your zombies had this and they ran fast and they had fangs or whatever. So bam, we got you.
Yeah. So you have to be. This is a really cool thing where creative works are offered to the public. So that way creativity can just continue to flow and expand. But at the same time, you have to be very, very careful to know the ins and outs of what you are trying to expand on. So you have to know what Mary Shelley's monsters look like. You have to know kind of like Mary Shelley, since we're talking about her, her nightmares. What was there? It was Nightmares, her book. I can't remember.
I never read Shelley, so I'm not for sure.
Oh my gosh. Dracula. What am I thinking? Dracula, the rendition of Dracula has the painting from an artist from 1817 or something like that. That image he painted is what we are using for Canvas as inspiration for our serial killer. So in a sense, I'm using something from Dracula. I'm using the image that she used to create a vampire series, and I'm using it as a setting for my killer.
So because 7 degrees of separation or whatever from Mary Shelley to Bram Stoker, back to you. I get it.
Yes.
We were talking earlier, you said it's 70 years after the death of the author, but what if you wrote a book in 1927 and you're 126 years old or whatever, you're still alive, but I know there is a law because I was asking you today, and you got in our notes 70 or 95 years, so you're like, hey, as of 2024, you can do everything.
Yeah, so it's really, really weird because a lot of stuff said 70 years and some things said 95 years. So I'm not 100% on that law where that actually changes. I don't know if it has to be like copyright from 95 years from copyright or life plus 70 years. So that's where it could be like if someone lives to be a lot older, it's like, okay, now it's only 70 years after they die versus they wrote this really young and it's technically 95 years after. So I don't know how that weights. That would be something to kind of like research because it changed based on because I went on the US, like the US copyright website and read all their laws. I went on to Duke University and read some of their stuff. Their stuff's like broke down really nice with their questions and stuff. So I watched a few YouTube videos on lawyers that were that had posted videos about it. So it didn't explain the 70 to 95 year thing because some said one and some said the other. So I'm not 100% sure.
I think even beyond that, because I know you went and looked at some that became available on January 1st, 2024. If you go to that website, you don't have to worry about 70 or 95. It'll list what is available for you.
Yeah, and this one is the American Writers Museum. I went on there, and it had like all the stuff from 2024 that was available public domain. So like Millions of Cats, Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle.
I got to write that one.
Coming of Age. It's like a Western.
You didn't even catch
Missing
me.
Chums. Some of these I've not heard of.
Millions of Cats. Millions of Cats. Millions of Cats.
Oh, that could be something that you can write because that's your life story.
I could write an original. Yes, I don't even need the public domain. All right.
The Trumpeter of Krakow. West Running Brook. There are a lot. Of course, the Steamboat Willie, which we talked about, which is, like I said, that one, I'd be very careful with using that one. So there was a guy in Canada who did a Steamboat Willie shirt and did kind of like a modern version. It was still the Steamboat Willie, but he had the red eyes and had some color. And so Disney tagged it and said, you can't do this. This is, we still have the copyright on this one. So he took off the color and took off the strange beating eyes and it's fine. because it's the original Steamboat Willie.
You know, I
Who
have a
was a little
friend.
different.
I won't say much about it. I'm sure he doesn't care, but they do a Harry Potter themed festival every year.
Yes.
So it's like 6 or
I
7
know
years.
you've been to it, Wizard Fest or something like
Yeah.
that.
So I wasn't going to say the name, but you done released it. So
You
Wizard
said it
Fest.
in previous podcasts.
Oh, I have.
Episodes.
Anyway,
Yeah.
they didn't say Harry Potter Fest or anything, but they've had actual characters from the movies there.
Mhm.
They got flagged by who puts out the, I don't know, is it Warner Brothers? Whoever
Yeah.
puts, they sent him a
That's
cease and desist.
Is that Universal? Because it's Universal
Oh
Studios.
yeah, it is Universal Studios.
Yeah, because they have their.
Oh, it was big for a minute. Like they were going to shut them down and demanded all this money, only because Wizard Fest started getting some notoriety.
Right.
But they handled it with lawyers and stuff, and they just had to change a few things. Like they can't call it. They have a formula they created for Butterbrew, but they can't call it that. They got to watch everything they say.
Butterbeer?
I think they changed it to butter. I can't remember what they changed it to.
Well, because isn't it butterbeer in the movie? So then it's probably butterbrew.
Oh, that's why. So I'm so used to saying Butterbrew. Yes.
Mhm.
So a few things they had to change, but of course you can't. If you hire an actor, because they do this all the time for Comic-Con and stuff, that Universal can't prevent Percy Weasley from going to this thing, and being. So it is a lot of Harry Potter, but yeah, that was kind of tricky for a minute.
Yeah. I took a picture of this. This is Section 8. This is something Congress shall have power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So it's only for a short time because copyright laws exclude protection for the following: procedures, systems, methods of operation, principles, facts, and ideas, works created by the U.S. federal government, processes and discoveries and concepts. So it's kind of like when someone comes up with a new mathematical theory that's not protected by copyright, but you are it's like you do get the recognition of being the creator of that.
No, I love your notes here, especially with Sherlock Holmes, which we've kind of talked about this, even though didn't mention it. They talked about the 10 Holmes Watson stories. This is probably why they have Enola Holmes on Netflix. It's fine.
Well, yeah, but some of those are still not public domain. So that's where I was talking about like the derivative works. So I put a picture. Do you see that one where it's like I don't know the picture of this. We'll scroll down one there. Random House did like in the company of Sherlock Holmes, the stories inspired by the Holmes canon. So they got in trouble by the creators because the original Sherlock Holmes, they were trying to do this anthology of his life. The original Sherlock Holmes didn't state that he didn't like dogs. Okay, that was like a further part of the work. That was a progressive part of the works. So
which is not in public domain currently.
That part of that character is not in public domain. So that's where it's kind of like this is your public domain. Anything created again after the fact is not allowed to be used in your storyline. So they kind of had to change all that up. So Enola Holmes might be like a new creation from the original public domain. See what I'm saying? So if it's not mentioned, I don't know if that's mentioned in some of the other series that he had a sister. I don't know, because I didn't read all of Sherlock Holmes.
And if you're very intuitive in reading a series, and you may deduce like, oh, I know where they're going with this, and I see what they're going to do. They're going to go to this island, but it hasn't been mentioned in that public domain work, but you haven't read ahead, and you decide to add that element to your version of using public domain, you may get busted. So if you want to use public domain and it's a series, I do highly suggest you read everything. I would take notes. I'm literally taking notes for Sigil right now every morning. I'm writing because even though I've written it, I've forgotten. So I have like all the spells that Revona can do. You need to keep track of everything so you don't even accidentally write something into your version of a public domain that actually existed in the future of that series.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I'm doing the same thing with Canvas because of course my classes have ended and I started rewriting, not rewriting, but working on Canvas. And even the other day we were somewhere. My husband's like, is that Canvas? I was on my phone. I was feeling like you because I never write on my phone because it's so hard to do. But I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back and work on it at night because I don't have as much. I feel like if you're listening, Grammarly, I don't like the mobile version of Grammarly as much as I do my laptop version. I just feel like it's not as easy. I can get all the words in there. I just don't have as much editing potential for like using it. I can't double click as easy. I can't use my thesaurus as easy that I can when I'm in my laptop version.
Thanks, you just talked me out of purchasing it now.
Stop it! No, I did not.
I'm teasing. No, but you see, that was a lot of
apps. I want Grammarly to like update that version. Like, dear Grammarly, I need you to update the mobile version.
No kidding. It will get there. I mean, it's grown so much. Like even digital audio workstations on an iPad or iPhone are not near like what actual Logic would be, but or Pro Tools or whatever. But they've come such a long way. So.
All right.
You know, you can do this with government. You know, if you're a government worker and you write stuff, it's not a 70-year thing. So, you know, if I'm a government scientist and I'm writing, you know, about cancer or something, that's immediately public domain. Now, I'm probably putting words in my mouth because that might not be a good example. But, you know, since the government works for us, they can't own it. It's available for you to read.
Yeah. So one of the notes that I put down, and I didn't write this in here. I wrote this part, but I didn't write the rest of it, was the work isn't fixed in a tangible form. So this is where Peter Pan, there was some people got in trouble for trying to do Peter Pan because even though it was in a play, like even though it was being in a script, a screenplay, essentially, it wasn't a screenplay, but even though it was written down for a screenplay, the actual work was not published into writing form until like 1928 or 1923, or I can't remember what the year was, but like it hadn't been officially written down. So even though like things such as your speech or lecture or improvisational of comedy routines haven't been previously written down or recorded in any manner, isn't protected by copyright. So therefore it is in public domain.
Yeah, so and especially with the government, they just, anything you do doesn't have copyright protection. So,
well, yeah, but it's kind of like press releases, things like that. Like you still, I mean, it's so weird how you have to be careful about how you utilize other people's words, how you reinvent intellectual property. So I would highly suggest that if you are going to go down this route, to be very careful to understand your rights and your options of writing something in public domain, and make sure that is legitimately in public domain.
Yeah, because you know what, even if you're like, oh, it's on the government website, therefore I can use it. It could have been a consultant, a freelancer, and they may have copyright protection over that, or they may transfer. And that's one situation where a government could own copyright. If I gave a lecture on how to shatter glass with my voice, and the government wanted to use it for something, that would not be public domain unless I said, okay, I have copyright, I want to transfer it to you, and then it becomes public domain.
Yeah.
So it gets tricky.
Something that is really cool. Let's see here. These are some of the upcoming public domain characters. So on January 1st, 2035, so about 11 years, we get Batman.
Oh, heck yes. I want to start writing the story now.
It'll take us about that long to finish it.
Yeah.
And my favorite, yes. So let's see here. When's Superman? I know Superman's coming up. Superman has, I can't remember when he's coming up, but I think 2034, so the year before that. So we can do Superman, then Batman. Donald Duck's coming up in the next, let's see, he's coming in 2030. Well, we just got Millions of Cats, so we know we can do that one.
I'm on it.
Yeah. So there's a lot. So you can look and see what's coming up. So essentially you can start writing ahead of time. Just don't publish it until be like January 1st, Pooh and Tigger and Roo.
Donald Duck versus
Piglet.
Batman.
Oh gosh. That would be interesting. But yeah, I don't know how that works. That would be a very interesting
There would be drugs involved, so I'm going to stay away from it.
Listen, this is the third episode you've talked about that. Like, I'm starting to worry.
We just talked about that. Hey, note to the general public: I do not do any drugs. I am naturally. It's so funny. I was with a student the other day. No, I called. I'm like, "Where are you at? Why are we not in a lesson? Your lesson's like 3 minutes ago. I'm in Nashville. I'm recording. Did I not know this?" They're like, "Yeah, we discussed it last week. Remember?" And I said, "I'm ADHD," and she's like, "No, you, Jamie, are JDHD."
I'm writing that one down.
They're JDHD. The Adventures of JDHD and his squirrels.
Adventures. That should be a good.
And his water.
Well,
and every night I'm like,
water bottle around.
I pee 15 times through the night, and I'm like, why do I do this? Why do I do this? And then I reset.
It's like when you're drinking more water than
you drink a lot, and you wake up, oh, I'm never going to do this again, and then you're out that night. So for the fourth time, I do not drink, I do not smoke, I do not do anything.
Yeah, he's not Willie Nelson.
I am JDHD.
Yeah. All right, so this has been a good, informative episode. Definitely think we should mark the calendars to do like a record what's coming up for 2025, and we'll put that one out there. So yeah.
Sweet.
Yes. All right. Okay. So as always, what are you doing?
I'm getting ready to read my notes for the next podcast we record.
For the next episode we're recording? Okay. All right. So as always, we really appreciate you listening, following, and sharing all of our information. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us at alwayswritepodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to follow us or find us on different social media platforms or find different ways of listening to us, you can go to www.alwayswritepodcast.com. And what are you laughing at?
I want to give a shout out to Dylan DeLay's mom. Just popped in my head from our conversation this week.
Oh, yes. Nene.
JDHD. All right.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you're funny. All right. So yes, thank you for listening. This will conclude this episode of Chaos. Until next time, I'm author Carissa DeLay, and this is
Jamie Vendera.
JDHD.
Yep.